If you'd like to follow the reading, I think it's on page 1089 in the Church Pew Bible. The reading is John chapter 20, and we begin to read at verse 19 to the end. And you could be forgiven for thinking that today is Groundhog Sunday. On the evening of the first day of the week, when the disciples were together with the doors locked for fear of the Jews, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." After he said this, he showed them his hands and his side. The disciples were overjoyed when they saw the Lord. Again, Jesus said, "Peace be with you. As the Father sent me, I am sending you." And with that, he breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone his sins, they are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven." Now Thomas, called Didymus, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe it." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your fingers here. See my hands. Reach out your hand and put it into my side. Stop doubting and believe." Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." Jesus did many other miraculous signs in the presence of his disciples, which are not recorded in this book. But these are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name. This is the word of God.
Thanks very much, John. Well, as I said, it's been a long time coming, and John's right. Today can feel a bit like Groundhog Day. Have you seen that film? It's a great film, it really is. The same thing happening again and again. Church can be a bit like that, can't it? I hope not. Not anymore anyway. But that's a problem. And we're going to try and do this series on Jesus, the ultimate rebel, and a focus on his life. Because I really do believe that Jesus is actually quite a rebel. I don't think that this kind of gentle Jesus, meek and mild figure that many of us kind of picture in our minds. You know, you've watched the Franco Zeffirelli Jesus of Nazareth film, you know, with Peter Powell and his piercing blue eyes, looking across and being very handsome and going like this, you know. That for me, that's just Hollywood. That's not the Jesus that certainly has changed my life. And I think for a lot of the fellas here this morning, the Jesus that's often depicted in storybooks and in Hollywood and stuff like that isn't really a man's man. And yet when I read the Gospels, the Jesus that I meet there is a guy who actually engages other guys, who can get hold of them and talk with them on their level and totally, radically transform their lives, no matter what kind of background they're from, whether they're Roman centurions, fighting men, or whether they are tax collectors like Matthew, who we'll come on to look at in this series a little bit, or the fishermen. You know, you read things, don't you, in the Gospels, and they just kind of, they're just there, and you take them for granted. But, you know, Jesus is walking along the shoreline one day, and everything's fine. And it says that this group of men put down their nets and followed him. And I think, you know, the astonishing nature of that is lost on us very often, because we don't, that's quite nice. Jesus comes along and everybody follows. Oh. But it's a radical thing, if you can get hold of it, that Jesus would be walking along and that these guys, these gruff fishermen, would put down everything and kind of just follow after him. Now, as I said 2 or 3 weeks ago, we are used to rebels in our world. There are lots of them. I don't know whether you watched the documentary about Prince Harry. Did you watch that? He's a bit of a rebel, isn't he? Hey? Yeah, he's an interesting fella, isn't he? Shot the Taliban was the heading in the Sun newspaper the next day. And but he's been a bit of a rebel. Las Vegas, my word. What was all that about? Ask my wife, she knows all about it, dear me. And, but, he's a bit of a rebel. Yeah, you know what I mean? He is a bit of a rebel. He's got his own agenda. He said himself, sometimes he's on public ceremony as Prince Harry. Other times he's Harry the bloke. And other times he's Harry the army officer. Vinnie Jones, those of you who are into football will remember Vinnie Jones. He was a bit of a rebel. And he was different than the norm. He was had a very interesting tackling technique when it came to football, shall we say. The problem is, you see, we live in a world where everything is the same. I was watching a film the other day with Sarah, and we got totally confused about which actress was which character, because they looked the same. And have you noticed this with lots of young people now? They all seem to start dressing the same. And some of the younger people here now are going, no, we don't. But lots of girls in particular seem to go for the same kind of look. And some guys do as well, let's be honest about it. And, everybody kind of merges. So when somebody stands out, you think, oh, look, they're different. And I think I said to you last time we were looking at this subject that, my mother would often say when we were out in town, look at him, who does he think he is? Dressed like that, his trousers around his knees. Why doesn't he pull them up? Now she says that about me. But, and when I was young, what was regarded as being rebellious is not rebellious anymore. As I said, when I was young, I had hair, before you start, Gareth, and I used to spike my hair, get my dad's Brill cream and and then you could get that gel, Grant will know what I mean, that gel that goes really hard. Yeah? Come on. Did you ever? Well, I did anyway. And, wait, no. You put that on. Oh, that was rebellious. That really was the way to do it. Now, that's not rebellious. A mate of mine got an earring. That was rebellious. One of my friends got a tattoo. Hey, he was the ultimate rebel in Swansea. Not anymore. 2013, having a tattoo, having an earring. Blinking heck, there are some wonderful tats out there, tattoos. There are some wonderful piercings people have all over the place. Is that rebellious? What's rebellious these days? Certainly what we might have thought as rebellious years ago is no longer viewed as rebellious today. But before I go any further, I just want to make it clear that Jesus isn't just like any of these rebels that I'm talking about at the moment. I say that because the truth is, people often do these things to themselves or adopt a certain dress code or whatever because it's quite an attention-seeking kind of thing. They're drawing attention to themselves. We've all done that. Let's be honest about it. But the reality is, as I read through the Gospels, I don't see Jesus doing that. But I do firmly believe he's a rebel. So if he's not drawing attention to himself in that kind of negative, stereotypical way, how do I think he's a rebel? Well, I think he's a rebel for a cause. And in 1960s America, there was someone called Rosa Parks. America in the 1960s was racist-ridden, and African Americans sat in the back of buses, and Rosa Parks one day said, no, it's not going to happen anymore. I'm going to move to sit in the front of the bus where the whites only were allowed to sit. And if you know your history, this was a key moment that really radically challenged what was the perceived norm. She rebelled against the establishment. She rebelled and kicked against the rules of society. And because she wasn't doing it to bring attention to herself, but rather to the cause, you'll know that that has radical repercussions. It's changed the way that certainly blacks and whites are now treated and understand each other in America and indeed across the world. And we praise God for that. She was a rebel, a complete rebel. She stood up against something and came against it. So that's one of the things that life-changing rebels do. They challenge authority. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, yeah, okay, hang on a minute. I can go with you that way, but how was Jesus doing that then? I mean, Jesus is a religious figure. And that's why we struggle, because the Jesus in our minds is so often this gentle Jesus, meek and mild, holding a lamb and a child and being all lovely. You look at Jesus' life. You look at what he did. He challenged authority again and again. He didn't just come along and fit in with the religious norms and with the religious people of his day. If you read through the Gospels, you see that Jesus was actually nice and gentle to the prostitutes and the whores. That's the reality. Didn't get on with the Baptist ministers. He wouldn't have much to do with them at all, actually. But if there was a prostitute or a criminal, if there was a lame man or a leper, somebody who was cast out and put away, so you had nothing to do with lepers, Jesus loved to be with them. That was a real rebellious streak. He hung out with the wrong people. He challenged authority. He was caring for the very people that the religious people didn't want anything to do with. They'd created these rules and these systems, these rituals. They focused on doing this and doing that, not on the heart of what it means to be a person of God. And that's a problem for us with religion in our country today, is that very often people get sucked into the whole thing of, well, I'm a good chapel goer. I come to Moriah, and you may have been very faithful here at Moriah for very many years. Praise God for that. But here's my question to you this morning. Do you know Jesus? That's the question that I want you to wrestle with. Do you know Jesus? I'm not asking you whether you're a member or how much you put in the offertory plate or whether you know the songs and the hymns. I'm not asking you what position you hold in the church. I'm not asking you about your dutiful and faithful attendance at services or anything like that. I'm asking you this. Do you know Jesus? Because if you get to know this guy, he will radically, seriously change your life. It's not about doing this, doing that, being seen here, being seen there. Do you know him? See, Jesus was so concerned about religion that he tackled and challenged the religious authorities with this very issue. In Matthew 23, you can read it for yourself. There's a series of teaching in Matthew 23 which is very hard, very difficult to take on board. Jesus is saying some very strong stuff. He says there in Matthew 23, how terrible it would be for you teachers of religious law and you Pharisees, because you cross land and sea to make a convert, and then you turn them into twice the son of hell as you yourself. That's a nice thing, gentle Jesus, meek and mild. Jesus is challenging them. You go all over the place to get a person to be religious just like you, and you turn them into a beast. You turn them into a monster. Twice the son of hell. He didn't particularly like the religious folk. He challenged their authority. As I said 3 weeks ago, I can imagine the disciples. They were a strange bunch, weren't they? But they remind me sometimes of when I was in school, and I'm sure you had this kind of thing. If there was a guy who was a bit tough, who would stand up to other people, I was brave if he was around. I'd stand behind him and I'd go, yeah. But if somebody came after me, I'd be like, no, it's him one. Do you know what I mean? I imagine the disciples being like that. Because when Jesus had a pop at the religious authorities, I bet everybody who heard that was going, yeah, too right on you. And they did it right up until the day that they put him on a cross. Or they were egging him on. But when it came to them standing up for him, as you know, they deserted him. They left him. It gets better, though, in Matthew 23. Jesus goes on in his challenge of the religious establishment. He says, how terrible it will be for you teachers of religious law and you Pharisees, you hypocrites. You're like whitewashed tombs. You're beautiful on the outside, but you're filled on the inside with dead people's bones and all sorts of impurity. See, here are the religious leaders who look so prim and proper. They have all these laws. And Jesus says, you're pathetic. You stink. You're nothing more than a grave. You might look good on the outside, lovely headstone, nice flowers. But the reality is, dig down, you're dead, decaying, rotting, stinking. The problem is, you see, we come to the Gospels, we open them up and we read things like this, and you never go deeper. But the reality is that's what Jesus is saying. He's challenging these people. It was rebellious to do that. Luke 11. How terrible it will be for you experts in religious law. You crush people beneath impossible religious demands. You never lift a finger to help ease the burden. He challenges the authority again. This is why, I've said to you before, I have difficulty myself explaining Christianity as a religion. Because religion is all about, you've got to do this, you've got to do that. You've got to earn brownie points with God so that maybe he'll accept you into heaven. That's the way a lot of people actually think. Have I been good enough? Will I be allowed in? Have I totted up enough credits? And yet Christianity at its heart says, you'll never be able to do that. So God, it's what we celebrate on December the 25th, took off his jacket, came to Bethlehem, born as a vulnerable baby, and there the Son of God came to us, rather than us needing to come to him. The reality is, if you look at your life, did you come to Jesus, or did you just fall into his hands and say, Lord, here I am? This guy is a rebel. He challenges the norm. I used the example 3 weeks ago about Manchester United. I think they went on to beat Liverpool that day. But, like them or loathe them as a team. Sir Alex Ferguson is an incredible manager for all his hairdryer treatment and all of this. But he is an exceptional guy. But can you imagine an academy player going up to him and saying, well, Sir Alex, I don't like the way you get us to play the game. It's the way my dad used to teach me when I was in the park. Oh, laddie, is that right? You can imagine Sir Alex having a few things to say. But that's what this is like. This is like the young upstart turning up on the scene and saying to the guy who knows everything, you're doing it wrong. Jesus is telling the religious establishment, you're doing it wrong. He's challenging their authority. But he didn't just have a go at people, he changed the rules. And rebels do that. They change the rules. Every society has rules, social norms. As I said last time, if you came over to my house and I invite you into my front room and you sit down and start eating my settee, we're going to have words. Because it's not socially acceptable to do that. Is it in Risca? I hope not. But there are some things, aren't there, which are standard. That's what we do. We expect things to be a certain way. Well, when I was a kid, come on, did you do the same? Did you want to change the rules to get your own way? We've all done that. I still do it with my kids to make sure I win. Because I want to win. I want to beat them. But I can remember as a kid going to a residential home for the elderly with my mum. And there was a group of women sat at a table and they were playing Buckaroo. Do you know Buckaroo? That's a great game, Buckaroo. And you have to hang all these things on this horse. Is it that you try to put them on the horse, or is it you try and take them off? Can't remember. You try and put them on. Oh, blinking. Yeah? You're doing all of this stuff, and the thing will Buckaroo if you do something wrong. The other game was Operation. Do you remember Operation? The amount of appendix I've removed. Dead. That's it. You're not allowed to touch the sides. Well, I watched these women. What is it with you women? Cheats. Every single one of them. This woman that was playing Buckaroo was holding down, there's a little thing, you can hold this thing. The Buckaroo was never going to Buckaroo. And I said to her, you can't do that. That's cheating. She said, I've changed the rules. When I went to do it, she said, you can't do that. So, it's all right for her, not all right for me. Well, Jesus changed the rules. He challenged what was going on. But not to benefit himself. He changed the rules actually to benefit humanity. Benefit you and me. He says, you've heard this rule, do not murder. Pretty good rule, I think you'd agree. But I have added to that rule, he said, I tell you, if you're angry, you're in danger of judgment. See, killing is an outward thing. Anger is an inward thing. And Jesus is concerned about what's going on in here. He's concerned about our attitudes, our emotional state. He's concerned about all of that because he's concerned for our life. He keeps on. You're so self-righteous. You say you shouldn't commit adultery. I've changed the rules. I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart. He knows outside you may not be having an affair with Mrs. Johnson down the street, but every time you look at her and you mentally undress her, something's wrong. That's the reality. He's challenging what's going on in here. And many times you and I will catch ourselves saying, oh, but I didn't do any. Well, hang on a minute. You may not have gone and done it. What's going on up here? What's going on in there? He changed the rules. He says about enemies. Anybody can run from an enemy, love a neighbor. But this is what he says. I tell you, don't resist an evil person. If somebody strikes you on the right cheek, turn to him the other cheek also. I tell you to love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. He changed the rules. That's what Jesus did. He's a rebel. And a rebel chooses the wrong crowd. That's another great thing about this Jesus. He chooses the wrong crowd. Rebels hang out together, don't they? I don't know whether you have this problem in Risca being such a nice place. But when we lived in Somerset, where they talk a bit like that, isn't it, Jane? No, my cocker. We had them hoodies. Did you have hoodies? Hoodies. You know, young people that wear. Jefferson's got one on, look. He is. You're a hoodie. You rebel. Come on, son. Okay? And this is the thing. And everybody said all these hoodies hanging around together. Oh, it's terrible. It's terrible. Well, it's not terrible. They hang out together. Gangs. People hanging out together. Matthew 9. That night, Matthew invited Jesus and his disciples to be his dinner guests, along with fellow tax collectors and many other notorious sinners. I love that. many other notorious sinners. Any notorious sinners here this morning? Put your hand up. Come on. Tax collectors were regarded as notorious sinners. They were the hoodies of their day. We don't like them because they take our money, but at least they do it legally, or at least meant to. But in those days, they didn't do it legally. They did it illegally. They ripped people off. So when it goes on and it says Jesus had dinner with tax collectors and other notorious sinners, it's interesting that it then goes on to say the Pharisees were indignant. That means they weren't very happy. They were ticked off. Why does your teacher eat? And the Greek literally means with such scum. What is Jesus doing hanging around with that lot? They're not good Baptist people. They're not Moriah folk. What's he doing with them? He's a rebel. He chooses his own crowd. What kind of crowd do we choose in our lives? Do we choose people who make us feel comfortable? We choose people like us very often. Do we say that we want to be part of that cute, fun, popular crowd? When Jesus, God in the flesh, came to earth, he chose the wrong crowd. He hugged and shook hands with the leper. Lepers had rules that they had to keep a distance from other people, but Jesus hung out with them. He gave forgiveness to a prostitute. He hung out with the people that the rest of the religious establishment stayed far away from, saying they're no good. And I often think about that. If Jesus were here today physically, what kind of crowd would he hang around with? Do you think he'd be here this morning with us? I think you need to think again. Where would Jesus hang out? I don't think he'd hang around the cute, fun, popular people. I think he'd go where the pain is. He's not hanging out with a crowd that's going to bring attention to themselves. He's hanging out with a crowd that is under the radar, that people largely forget. He'd be up in some of the homes in Teesside or under the bypass bridge where often they find needles and syringes. He'd probably be helping with some of the needs of people because he chooses the wrong crowd. The kids who hang around in the park here, with their weird attitudes and their insecurities and their lack of personal hygiene. Poor, some of them stink. That's where he'd be. That's the Jesus here. Might not be the Jesus in your picture book or the gentle Jesus, meek and mild that your grandmother used to sing to you about, but I'm telling you, it's the biblical Jesus, because he's a rebel. With all their histories and abuses, with all their addictions and insecurities, Jesus would be with them. So let's get practical as we pull things together. I'm convinced all of us need to watch our conversation and our body language as we seek to be effective witnesses of the gospel here in Risca. Our body language sometimes communicates to people, I don't like you. I disapprove of you. You are not like me. Think about the conversations that you have when you come out of church on a Sunday and the kids are there. And their language is choice and some of the things that they're talking about are maybe not things that you want to hear about. But what do you say to them? What does your body language communicate to them? See, I'm convinced that as we talk about Jesus and demonstrate Jesus to this town, we're going to need to be countercultural. We're going to need to be flowing upstream from the normal attitudes and the negative attitudes that people have towards people like those youngsters. We need to be rebellious. We need to be, as a church, people who will stand with the poor and the marginalized here in Risca. Don't tell me they're not here, because they are. We are the ones who need to stand with the disadvantaged and the abused. And I know that as I'm speaking now, the Holy Spirit himself is perhaps whispering to some of you, yeah, that's right. There's something in you that says, you're right, Mark, but I'm just not courageous enough. I want to do it, but I can't. Do you remember that scandal that broke when Clinton was president of America, and tens of millions of people saw Monica Lewinsky talking on television. Do you remember that? And she confessed of having had, was it 2 affairs, I think, with married people. And everybody, there was outrage. The press in this country, as well as in America, full of it. Everybody on her case. And I can remember looking at her on a news item and seeing a 25-year-old girl, that's how old she was, 25 years of age, who had no moral compass in her life. And I wondered, had anybody ever told her about Jesus? Had anybody shared Christ with her, saying to her, Monica, there's a better way to find self-worth and significance and security in your life? See, if we live the world's way, if we blend into the crowd, we are going to be affected. As I talk about this rebel, Jesus, I pray that there's something in each of us that stirs up saying, yeah, that is him, isn't it? See, the reason I can say that to you is because he created you. The Bible says that he wants a relationship with you. And as we get to know Jesus increasingly throughout this series, I pray that we will want that more and more. To discover more and more about him. So here's some action steps as you leave this service this morning. I want you to start during this week. If you want to get to know this rebellious Jesus more, here's my challenge to you. Learn about his life. Now, that's why we're here. This is a place where we can meet with Jesus. People need to find out who Jesus is, and where better to do it than here. Because Jesus was either crazy, I mean, maybe Jesus was just a whacked-out nutcase. Let's just be blunt. Let's state that. Some people think that he was. What he said isn't true. What we've been following for 2,000 plus years is a load of nonsense. Maybe he was just a good teacher. Some people say that about him. Oh, he was a good man. Good man. Said some nice things. Matthew 5, the Sermon on the Mount. If the world lived like that, oh, it'd be lovely. Is that Jesus? Or maybe he was who he said he was, the Son of God. And if that's true, our whole lives change. Look what it says in John 20, those words that John read for us a moment ago. He says at the end of that little passage, these things are written that you may believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God. And by believing in him, you might have life. Not a lousy life, not a pain-filled life, but Jesus said, I came that you might have life to its fullest degree. Life in this world and life that is everlasting. Life in all its fullness. I love that little incident in Acts chapter 17, where the Bereans, we're told, were of noble character, of more noble character than the Thessalonians. For they received the message with great eagerness, and they examined the scriptures every day to see if what Paul said was true. When's the last time you, personally, examined the scriptures? When's the last time you did it eagerly? There's my challenge to you. You want to get to know Jesus? Read Marc's Gospel. Great Gospel, named after a great guy. It's the shortest one. Read Marc's Gospel this week. Just meet Jesus in Mark's Gospel. Go through Mark's Gospel. Look at Jesus' life. Examine it. See, if you were going to buy a car this afternoon, you would not go to Curry's. You wouldn't, would you? I hope you wouldn't. I have it on good authority, they don't sell cars. You would go to a garage. A garage. Yeah, you would go to buy a car where they sell cars. It would be stupid to go to Curry's and say, does this fridge have an ice maker? Yes, it does, sir. Thank you. I'll be buying a Honda Civic. What? doesn't work. You may well have been coming to church for donkey's years. But have you ever checked Jesus out? This is a great church to belong to. But do you know Jesus? You may be involved in something in this church. But do you know Jesus? Because he's at the center of everything we're about. And I love that thing in Acts 17. It talks about their eagerness. Don't come to church and just go through the motions. God forbid that we would do that. God forbid that we sit here week after week going, done that. Offertory next. That's why I vary the order of service. Keep you awake. Because have you been in services like that? Everybody knows what's coming next. No. Have you lost your eagerness? Get it back. Get back to Jesus. Get back to basics. Start with him. Some of you need a spiritual kick up the backside. We're going to start an Alpha course. Come along. Have a word with me. Come along to an Alpha course. 8, 12 weeks, whatever it is. Food, chat, low level, easily accessible. Fantastic. Come, do it. Re-engage with Jesus. He's the one. I think as you learn about his life, you're going to start loving his teaching. I've discovered that for myself. His teaching is awesome. Mrs. Evans was my teacher. She was awesome. I loved her. I make no secret about it. The first woman I've ever loved. This was in the mid-1970s. Bean bags in the classroom with those little dangly bits on them. Beads hanging off them. And she would say to me, Mark, I will let you sit on your favourite beanbag if you read that book. Yes, Mrs. Evans. I loved Mrs. Of course. I love Jesus. In all seriousness. Yeah, guys, I love him. Changed my life. I love his teaching. Because he's radical. He's a rebel. He can change everything about this life we live. Learn about him. Luke 10, as Jesus and the disciples continued their way to Jerusalem, they came to a village where a woman named Martha welcomed them into her home. Her sister Mary sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he taught. But Martha was worrying about the big dinner she was preparing. She came to Jesus and said, Lord, doesn't it seem unfair to you that my sister just sits here while I'm doing all the work? Sounds like our house, sisters. Tell her, come and help me. The Lord said to her, dear Martha, you're so upset over these details. There's really only one thing worth being concerned about. And Mary's discovered it. Me. Jesus. And he's here. He's here. And some of us are a bit like Martha, you see. We're so concerned about everything else. More concerned about, oh gosh, come on, Mark, hurry up. I've got to be home for my dinner. Has Andy Murray won? It's about Jesus. It's about Jesus. Get out of Mark's Gospel this week. Read it. Read it. Discover more of him. And finally, I'll finish with this. Live his way. Live his way. I made a decision when I was in secondary school. Just a bit younger than Jefferson. I made a decision to learn more about Jesus. I made a decision in secondary school to fall in love with his teaching. And I made a decision in secondary school to live his way. Because I became a Christian when I was in secondary school. And here, 30 years later, I can honestly stand before you as your pastor and say, I haven't got a single regret. I haven't got a single regret of choosing to follow Jesus. Life's been awesome. Been tough at times. It's not been a bed of roses. Don't think for 1 minute that this is what this is about. But I'm telling you, this guy has changed my life. And if you let Jesus invade your life, if you make him the Lord of your life, if you step down off the throne of your life and move from the driver's seat to the passenger seat, and you say to him, okay, Jesus, you take control, you won't regret it. So that's my encouragement to you. For those of you who are weary, check out Jesus. Check him out. How important is Jesus to you? Are you letting him make you a rebel who goes against the grain, who goes against the flow? Learn about his life. Love his teaching. Live his way. And you can pick any person that you like, you see, and these same things apply. And if I've got one concern, we're going to have a short meeting afterwards with some of the folk working with our young people. Because you apply these three things to any young person today, and you'll see that this is what part of the problem with society is. They look at personalities, they look at sports people, they look at their lives, they look at what they're saying, and they look at how they're living, and they want to be like them. And how many young lives are in trouble today because they're trying to be like other people? Lady Gaga, David Beckham, these big, big personalities. People want to be like them. And dare I say it, it's not just the young people. Many of us here this morning will be trying to follow somebody else that we aspire to be like, that we look up to. We're interested, we hang on their lives. We're interested in the celebrity gossip pages. We love to catch what they're saying on Twitter all of the time. We follow the stories about what they're doing with their lives. But what about being a bunch of rebels? What about going against the flow? What about living for Jesus?